let's talk about Rankin Bass's Return of the King.
You won't have to say goodbye.
Oh, now they remember the ring is supposed to look plain. The other movies in this trilogy have their fans, but generally, this is the black sheep of the animated Tolkien adaptations. Even the filmmakers weren't particularly happy with how it turned out.
Put all that material into a film is very, very difficult. And we found that, not with The Hobbit. The Hobbit worked, because it's a simpler story. But The Return of the King, we had to summarize what had happened before and put it all together in 2 hours. It's not a very good film.
The fact that it even exists is baffling enough. It's a common misconception that Rankin Bass stepped in to finish the trilogy when it became clear Bakshi's sequel wouldn't happen, tying up the loose ends just so there would be a conclusion. And even ignoring the difference in character designs and voices, it doesn't really tie up those loose ends. Not only does Treebeard completely disappear, but Gimli and Legolas too, although given how they drew Legolas's dad, that's probably just as well. Saruman and Wormtongue also disappear, although that's just a trend in non-extended editions. We never see Merry and Pippin reunite with Gandalf, nor do we see Aragorn leave Gandalf. He's just returning from somewhere. Also, Frodo just has the Phial of Galadriel. We never see him get it in the Bakshi movie. And apparently its magic only works by keeping the star a secret.
The Phial of Galadriel. I can say no more. But if I betray the trust and give the secret, its powers will die.
Okay. And then some characters just never show up in either movie. There's no Shelob, for instance. We just have to assume that the trap Gollum was leading Frodo and Sam to was just these orcs.
She might help us.
And there's no Faramir unless this dude next to Éowyn at the end is Faramir. Or maybe it's Éomer? Or maybe Erkenbrand, Baragond, Imrahil? There's no way of knowing. So if this was made to tie up Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, it does not succeed in that mission. But here's the thing. It wasn't made to tie up Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. The phrase Lord of the Rings isn't even used in the title, or even in that weird based on the original version credit.
Not the one with the hills and beds.
The truth is, Rankin Bass's plan was always to just make 2 movies, The Hobbit and The Hobbit 2, The Return of the King, or The Hobbit 2, Frodo, as was also considered as a title. They began working on their Return of the King before their Hobbit was even released. I can't believe that by never seeing the Bakshi movie as a kid, I was watching these as Rankin Bass intended.
Why did you, just out of curiosity, go straight to The Return of the King instead of parts 1 and 2? Of that trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
I didn't know that we could handle it. I didn't know the audience would sit still for it. I was wrong.
So, you thought that just telling one story and then the very end of a kind of related story was the solution? I'm going to apologize to Beauty and the Beast live on stage. I take back everything I said about a series of strange circumstances. So, this isn't a conclusion to an epic trilogy. It's just a sequel to The Hobbit. The result is a Tolkien adaptation that has less in common with its own source material than it does with the earlier adaptation of a related but very different piece of source material. Fortunately, that would never happen again! Sure, the movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense as a conclusion to a trilogy it never meant to conclude, but it makes even less sense as the standalone sequel to The Hobbit it actually was meant to be. We just start with this shot of Mount Doom, which is totally different from the Lonely Mountain, and Gandalf tells you that a story's happening.
Hear you now, a story of good against evil.
Then it's Bilbo's birthday in Rivendell, and we're going to tell Bilbo the story, but not the whole story, just the part that starts with Return of the King.
But why destroy a thing of such wondrous magic?
It was an evil thing, sir.
Just trust us, the ring was evil. We don't need any more details about what was evil about it, and never you mind that Gandalf was cavalier about its true nature earlier, and now we're in Mordor. A lot happened off screen. Just catch up yourselves. Everyone talks a lot about how King Aragorn is going to return, and it makes him come off like a mysteriously missing king of old, someone who disappeared ages ago, and generations have been awaiting his return in a Christ-like fashion, which I guess is kind of accurate. But it does not get across the fact that he was just hanging out with Frodo not long ago. Also, they leave in Gollum calling Frodo Master, but They do not leave in any of the setup for that relationship.
Wicked master.
Odd choices all around. Being a sequel to The Hobbit, this naturally focuses on the hobbits. Like, look at this cover for one of the later VHS releases of the movie. It makes it look like Frodo is the titular king. Also, it makes it look like dwarves are in this movie. There are no dwarves in this movie. Not even in the flashbacks to The Hobbit. In fact, despite the fact that I saw this movie many times as a kid, before revisiting it for the series, I could not remember if Aragorn is even in this. The titular king made very little impact in Return of the King.
In a distant land, the noble Aragorn, heir to the empty throne of Gondor, awaited with a small band return and become king. But he could not triumph until the ring was destroyed.
Oh, okay, there he is. That's why I couldn't remember. I was getting him mixed up with Hanna-Barbera's version of King Saul. Wrong Greatest Adventure. Houston and Theodore return as Gandalf and Gollum, as well as Orson Bean as not only Bilbo, but also Frodo. Paul Frees steps in for Elrond, and he didn't die until 6 years later, so I think he broke the animated Elrond curse. The apparently forgettable titular King Aragorn is played by Theodore Bikel, making his scenes with Gandalf kind of an African Queen reunion? Nellie Bellflower plays Éowyn, the first female Tolkien character Rankin Bass animated. Seriously, even all the extras in Lake Town were male. What's with that? Oh, wait, no, I'm wrong. She's the second female character, if you count Rosie Cotton, in this fantasy sequence Sam has about settling down earlier in the movie. Fourth, if you count the daughters in that same fantasy sequence. Speaking of Samwise, he's Roddy McDowall, and if you liked him talking to himself on the phone in The Cat from Outer Space, you'll love him talking to himself walking through Mordor.
Fighting among themselves? Oh, I could get in. They wouldn't notice me. The ring holds me back. True. Once the orcs saw me, they'd forget their own arguments for the head of an enemy.
God help us!
I believe you mean Eru Iluvatar help us? At least I think so. I haven't read the Silmarillion, but that's what I'm told. Pippin is Sonny Melendez, and Merry is Casey Kasem. And with all due respect to Dominic Monaghan, I think that means that legally, live-action Merry should have been Matthew Lillard. And other animation mainstays joined the cast, including Don Messick, speaking of Scooby-Doo, as both Theoden and the Mouth of Sauron. And the Rocky and Bullwinkle narrator himself, William Conrad, plays a take on Denethor that makes me want to apologize to the live-action movie. I take back everything I said about that Denethor losing his dignity.
Nay, soon all shall be burned. The West has failed. It shall go up in a great fire, and all shall be ended. I have looked inside my palantir.
What is that?
Palantir, the stuff of wizards.
You would know that if anyone had animated Book 3, Chapter 11. And once again, the pronunciations are all over the place. Like, Bakshi at least made an effort with authenticity, it's just that some pronunciations slip through the cracks in the chaos of production. But with this movie, these are the people who mixed up the runes on Thror's map. I'm pretty sure they didn't even know there were pronunciation guides in the appendices.
Ah, you know the gates to the land of Mordor and your Dark Lord Sauron, Cirith Ungol.
Minus Tirith.
Gorath.
And yes, this thing is full of little changes that I have to imagine were in the service of making it more kid-friendly, not too scary. Merry and Pippin reunite happily during battle. Merry has no need for the Houses of Healing.
Hail, proud Mary!
Keep on going!
When Aragorn shows up, the armies of Mordor just run away.
Aragorn, he who would be our king, had returned, and the hosts of Mordor were seized with bewilderment, and they fled.
Ah, crap, Aragorn's here! What's the use of trying? And oddest of all, they keep Theoden's death, but they cut the Nazgul attacking him. Instead, how does he die?
The new morning was blotted from the sky, and the dark fell upon him.
No, Snowman, no!
And the dark force had claimed our savior. And what event, at just that moment, caused evil to enlist such power? Nothing here, surely, but in the bowels of Mount Doom.
I have come, but I do not choose to do now what I have come to do.
Frodo fucking killed Theoden! And then, of course, Éowyn does her thing.
No living man may hinder me.
But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Éowyn am I.
Wait, there are women in this universe? This scene would have been really effective if we had ever met Éowyn before this, or seen the relationship between her and Theoden. As it stands, Mary has to fill us in on why this matters, and that just makes it awkward.
A woman? Éowyn? 'Tis Lord Theoden's niece. She wanted to ride with us, but he forbade. She disguised as a knight and she came hither.
Uncle, I have avenged thee!
By killing the guy who did not kill you in this version! But as with all of these, there are things I like about this adaptation. I really appreciate that they were smart enough to make Sam the focus. They even give him the pity for Gollum that they neglected to give Bilbo.
How can I kill such a pitiful and cringing abomination? I have come to know the strain of bearing the ring for even a little while. But this miserable creature enslaved to it for years. Oh, curse you, you stinking thing! Be off! I don't trust you, not as far as I could kick you. But be off!
Sam is the POV character more often than not, and I feel like an even lesser production would have just shoved him into the sidekick role. It's not quite the bumbling Bakshi Sam coming into his own, but it is a Sam who has already come into his own and is determined to get the job done. I especially love that they included Sam's temptation by the ring.
I could claim you, ring. I would be Samwise the Strong!
It's such a brief moment in the book that it's easy to forget, and I don't mind when adaptations just eliminate the risk of Sam being corrupted, but I love when it's included. I love that Sam both is tempted and is able to resist the temptation. And I love how wholesome his dark evil fantasy is.
This orc-infested desert of nameless horrors, let it live for Samwise the Strong! Behold, the gardens of my delight!
Gardens everywhere! Mwahahaha! Incessant talking to himself aside, Roddy McDowall does such a good job as determined warrior Sam that I really wish we got to hear him do the beginning of the arc too. Hear him as nervous, scared gardener Sam. I just want one complete Samwise arc in a cartoon. Is that too much to ask? And of course, being a sequel to The Hobbit, there are songs. Problem is, there's less poetry in Return of the King than there is in The Hobbit or even Fellowship. So most of these songs are kind of made up out of whole cloth, although some are sort of inspired by lines of dialogue from the text. And with a few exceptions, these songs are largely forgettable. But they gave them an in-universe singer this time, and yes, he's Glenn Yarborough.
We have brought with us someone who has written a ballad about the adventures of Frodo, the minstrel of Gondor.
Frodo of the 9 fingers and the ring of doom.
Now, the lyrics of this song don't come from the book, but the existence of it does. Book 6, Chapter 4, there's a minstrel of Gondor singing about Frodo of the 9 fingers and the ring of doom. And yet, both Tolkien Gateway and One Wiki to Rule Them All claim this character only exists in the film. I know about a character from the book that the 2 most prominent Tolkien wikis don't. I should not be so smug about this because I'm sure I've been getting so many other details wrong. Anyway, in the book, the Minstrel of Gondor is in Gondor, which makes sense, but I guess he came all this way to Rivendell just to tell Bilbo the story because, well, what else is he gonna do? So he sings a song that's one of the few in this that I kinda like, even if the lyrics need work.
When Bilbo found that shiny ring in Gollum's cave of gloom, he never thought that it would turn into a ring of doom.
Well, in his defense, if a ring of doom had been a concept that was even on his radar, the possibility might have crossed his mind that the one in the Cave of Gloom would become one.
Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom. It started with a hobbit in Gollum's Cave of Gloom.
Boy, you were really proud of that rhyme, huh, Jules? As for the rest of the songs, well, there's the song that reprises whenever someone succumbs to the ring's temptation or is on the verge of doing so.
The bearer of the ring, the wearer of the ring, stands on the very brink of fame. The bearer of the ring, the wearer of the ring, the bearer of the ring, the wearer of the ring.
The snarer of the ring, the sharer of the ring, the scarer of the ring, tumblerer of the ring. There's Less Can Be More during Sam's settling down fantasy, which musically is like an okay folk music B-side, but the lyrics are at least attempting to engage with Tolkien's themes of the value of simplicity.
Less can be more, and small can be beautiful. I don't want it all, just part of wonderful.
Or maybe it's just the production team trying to justify the simpler TV cartoon rather than a more complete adaptation. There's Leave Tomorrow Till It Comes, a song that seems counterintuitive at this urgent hour in the story.
Leave tomorrow till it comes. Sleep will ease your mind.
But it pairs with this wild dream sequence. So Frodo has some dreams in Fellowship that are usually left out of adaptations. Return of the King mentions uneasy dreaming, but it doesn't really give specifics, so this is pretty much made up out of whole cloth. Frodo dreams of a happier version of the quest, where Mordor is lush, orcs are friendly, destroying the ring is simple, but apparently still necessary even though there's no evil. And then Gandalf and Sam turn into orcs, which are no longer friendly. It's a wild moment, but it is a pretty accurate representation of anxiety dreams. There's The Towers of the Teeth, a taunting song the forces of Mordor seem to be singing at Aragorn's men as they march toward the Black Gate.
If you win, then you will lose. Choice of evil's yours to choose. Retreat. 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 Retreat.
Heads I win and tails you lose. Why do hobbits wear no shoes on feet? Retreat, retreat, retreat. There's the victory song in the denouement, which isn't all that memorable, but I do like that it includes a reference to the Houses of Healing.
The end of the ring, the return of the king, he shall rule with a true healing hand.
Throughout the piece, there's a reprise of The Road Goes Ever, Ever On, which includes a verse about not trying.
It's so easy not to try. Let the world go drifting by. If you never say hello, you won't have to say goodbye.
I am not sure if it's in favor of giving up, or if it's saying, good for you, you made an effort, that takes work. Or maybe it's singing to the armies of Mordor that just immediately gave up when Aragorn showed up? I don't know, it's really hard to read, this one. Also, there's the best song in the whole movie.
Where there's a whip, there's a way.
All the Goblin songs, total jams. I don't care that the song is tonally inappropriate for this movie, this universe, this everything. I love this song. I love these orcs. Look at this Muppety orc captain with his wide mouth and a neck that looks like the perfect fit for Carol Spinney's arm. I love it all. And even though this scene makes me want to apologize to Disney's Robin Hood and take back everything I said about its reused animation, it is the best scene in the whole movie. Because it does three very interesting things that aren't in the book. First off, it humanizes the orcs way more than Tolkien ever did.
We don't wanna go to war today, but the Lord of the Lashes says nay, nay, nay.
Yep, big mood. Second, it gives Sam even more agency, as he actually fuels the fight that allows him and Frodo to escape.
And you call yourself an orc? You're right! Right! Kill him! Own them!
And third, it changes the battalion that they squabble with from other orcs to a battalion of men, which ties it thematically with the notion that the world of man is taking over. A theme that is pervasive in the book, and it's the theme that the movie really seems to double down on, even though I'm not entirely sure how it feels about that theme.
Consider no less than the cataclysmic transformation of that ancient world of wonder and magic to the world we know now, of man.
Especially at the end. Sure, they skip the scouring, but since they never show the return to the Shire, they don't outright deny that it was corrupted, so small victories. Bilbo announces that he's leaving Middle-earth tomorrow with Gandalf and Elrond, and Frodo decides he wants to come.
But I thought only elves departed thus. How can Bilbo join you?
Bilbo has served us well. There is always room for a friend.
Have I served thee well?
Need you ask such a question?
I have grown weary of this world. The weight of the ring all these years has worn me far beyond my age. I would, if it pleases you, set sail with you on the morrow.
This isn't exactly decided on a whim, mind you, since he had the thought of doing such a thing earlier in his adventure, but that was a passing fancy that he didn't exactly give much deliberation to.
And only elves can escape Middle-earth. They board the white ships at the Grey Havens and sail off to the lands beyond.
Roads go ever on.
He didn't even really think it would be possible for him to leave earlier. He was just like, huh, that's a nice fantasy. Now he's just ready to go because he's weary and it's the age of man.
Will there be no room for hobbits in this new age of man?
For us all, hobbits are the closest to men. One day they will be as men are. Frodo is a bit larger than Bilbo, just as you are larger than Frodo. And younger still than you, and larger, are Merry and Pippin.
Nothing to do with Entraft, you're just naturally big.
There'll be those humans who might well wonder, is there hobbit in me? Is there?
Okay, so it's no, well, I'm back, but the idea of the hobbits assimilating into humankind is an interesting note to end the movie on. I mean, it's definitely meant to pander to the child watching at home. You could be a hobbit too. Anyone can wear the fuzzy feet. Into the Hobbit-verse. But considering Tolkien's notion that the hobbits are just really rare now and avoid the big folk, the idea that the descendants of hobbits are among us is interesting. In this moment, it's definitely played as a hopeful, inspiring note, but you could also read it as humanity just kind of taking over hobbitkind and erasing its culture, the gentrification of the Shire. I don't know. And then the very last notion of the movie is a reprise of the notion about not bothering to start.
If you never say hello, you won't have to say goodbye.
What is this movie trying to say? That Sam would be happier if he just never met Frodo in the first place? Like I said, this movie is interesting. And like I said, I don't think this is better than the other two movies, but by being less beholden to the literal text of the book, I find myself spending less time just comparing individual moments to the source material, and more time appreciating the strange but charming mess it is on its own, and scratching my head as I try to analyze the brand new additions it makes to the story. I don't know what all this is going for, but it's definitely going for something, and I have a weird respect for the attempt.